This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Welcome to today's meeting of the Fire Committee. On our agenda today is a discussion of the well-being of London's firefighters. Before we begin, we have a few small items of business. Please may I remind participants to silence your devices. Members of the public may like to follow @London Assembly on social media and use the hashtag AssemblyFire for this meeting. Can I ask our clerk, Diane Richards, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received today from Assembly Member Bukhari, OBE.
Thank you very much. We now come to declarations of interest. Can we note the list of offices held by Assembly members? No. Can I also ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests in specific items listed on the agenda? No. Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of a meeting held on 2nd of December 2025? Agreed. Thank you. Can we note the completed and outstanding actions arising from previous meetings of the committee and the additional correspondence sent? No. Thank you. We now move on to the annual documents prepared by the London Fire Brigade in accordance with the Fire and Rescue National Framework, the LFB budget submission, which forms the efficiency plan and includes the medium-term financial strategy and the draft reserve strategy and the draft statement of assurance. These come to the committee in accordance with Section 3271 of the Greater London Authority Act 1999 as amended. Once the committee has discussed the documents in accordance with the Act, the committee must make a report or recommendations to the Mayor. Do members have any specific questions or comments on these documents? No. Thank you very much. Can I ask the committee to note the London Fire Commissioner's draft reserve strategy and medium-term financial strategy and agree to make the following report to the Mayor? The committee notes the financial challenges facing LFB, but these challenges make it especially worrying that LFB will be operating without a budget flexibility reserve for the next 2 years, and the General Fund Reserve, which is below minimum target levels, leaving it with limited financial resilience to respond to financial risks. Additionally, the Fire Safety Improvement Reserve, which was previously used to fund the Modern Firefighter Training Programme, has also been largely depleted, and LFB has no source of funding to complete this much-needed programme. The committee therefore calls on the Mayor to outline how it will be supporting LFB whilst the reserve's funds are so heavily depleted. Can I also ask the committee to note the London Fire Commissioner's draft statement of assurance for 2024-2025 and agree to make the following report to the Mayor? The committee acknowledges the document and its contents. However, we seek further assurances on LFB's progress towards achieving all of the targets contained within the Community Risk Management Plan. In particular, the committee seeks assurances that the measures outlined to improve staff sickness will bring rates within target for 2025-2026. We also reiterate our ongoing concerns regarding the Brigade's efforts to recruit a more diverse workforce, especially if it intends to review its staff composition target for 2026-2027. These points are also relevant in terms of the Brigade's works towards the HMIC-FRS 11 areas of improvement, of which one is to identify and overcome barriers to equal opportunity. The committee therefore seeks further assurance on how the Brigade will monitor and make improvements ahead of the next HMIC-FRS inspection, particularly in those areas previously rated as adequate or requires improvement. Noted. Thank you very much. Can I make a trigger warning for today's meeting, because we're going to be talking about sensitive subjects? We know that some of the content of today's meeting might be difficult for some listeners, so we'd like to remind you that help is available 24/7 from organisations such as the Samaritans. And brief. We now move on to our main item, a discussion on the well-being of London's firefighters. Can I welcome our first panel of guests, Professor Rowena Hill, MBE, Professor of Psychology, School of Social Sciences of Nottingham Trent University. Welcome back. Professor Joe Yarker, Co-Strategic Director of London Centre for Work and Health. Thank you for being here. And Dr. Danielle Lamb, Theme Lead, London Centre for Work and Health. Thank you very much. And joining remotely, we have Dr. Carolina Campo-Donico, Senior Lecturer in Clinical Psychology, School of Psychology and Humanities, University of Lancashire. Welcome online, Carolina. Rowena, if I can begin with you, it's a question for everyone, but I'll start with you. Why are we seeing an increasing number of firefighters off work for prolonged periods of time due to stress, anxiety and depression? If you could just pop your microphone on. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. I suppose one of the things that I would like to invite the committee to do is to put that into context. So I think this isn't the only profession that we're seeing, and I think whenever we consider specific professions and specific geographies, as you are committed to do and obliged to do, we need to put that in the context of the wider population. There is kind of over the course of the last 25 years that I've been working alongside the fire and rescue services, there's been quite a development in some of the mental health reporting that's been going on over the studies over the years. Some of that is to do with the perceived changing nature of the job. Some of that is to do with the way in which the resourcing of some of those specific occupational aspects. I don't necessarily see that as much in London because you have a bigger resource for mental health support than most other services around the country. But also there's an increasing recognition that research has, to a greater or lesser extent, arbitrarily looked at the occupation as the individual at work rather than the individual nested in society, nested within an organisation. So that work-home life domain and that work-home life balance hasn't necessarily been seen within the literature. So I would probably put the question back to the committee around what the validity of that assumption is. I don't think we've got enough clear evidence at the moment that's up to date and is replicable to suggest that we can answer that either way at this point in time. So, for example, some of the work that myself and my team have been involved in, particularly led by Professor Karen Slade with the Firefighters Charity, when we understood to be a perceived understanding that there was a greater death by suicide rate within the UK Fire and Rescue Services. Looking at those numbers, there isn't a higher or lower rate. It seems to be tracking the general population. That said, we firmly believe that one death is one death too many. So, you know, that is a given, that position. I think there is equal amounts of evidence to suggest that actually there isn't a greater or lesser proportion, particularly some of the recent systematic literature review studies that have come out, to suggest that actually mental health reporting and diminished or negative mental health isn't necessarily tracking differently to the rest of the UK wider population. There's other studies that suggest that there is. So that's why I don't think that we can necessarily assume one way or the other currently whether there is or isn't.
That's really interesting and really helpful context to start the meeting. Thank you. Carolina, going to you online, just to ask if you agree with this, is there things you disagree with, and in your opinion, what's the reason for the increasing number of firefighters off work?
Well, with the Fire Brigade Union, we ran a survey, a national survey, and we had 4,960 completed answers, of which 11.5% were from London. So we're talking 571 respondents from London only. What we did see is that there are a few clear patterns that stand out, really. Exposure to trauma is extremely common, which I think it is a justification for the mental health and difficulties and people being off sick. With the most common traumas including mental health incidents, serious road accidents, natural disasters, violent incidents and domestic violence. More than half of our respondents reported experiencing mental health consequences resulting specifically from responding to the incidents I just mentioned, with only a small percentage, like 1 in 4, reporting to have seen a mental health professional about it. So I guess that ought to have an impact.
Thank you very much. Danielle and Joe, we're going to bring you in a moment, but first of all, I'm going to go to Assembly Member Clark.
Yeah, thank you. Carolina, I was going to come to you about your survey, actually. Did it produce any new insights into the mental health of firefighters?
Well, I would say so. I think this is the largest survey of its nature in the UK. As I mentioned, we found a very high rate of exposure to trauma, which is hardly surprising, to be fair. It's important to add that many people don't always recognize the impact of trauma in themselves. So changes like increased irritability, sleep problems, or drinking more, with around 1 in 5 showing risk for alcohol dependency, are often normalized as part of the job or part of life rather than recognized as trauma responses. So potentially we're looking at even higher percentages. One thing that's particularly striking is sleep. Around a third showed sign of clinical sleep disturbances. And in London, this is very strongly linked to shift work, workload, and mental health. Consider that poor sleep doesn't just affect well-being, it affects decision-making, reaction time, and safety. We also found that symptoms of distress are quite widespread. In our data, roughly a third of the respondents show signs of mild anxiety on clinical measures, with a further third showing moderate to severe anxiety symptoms, and this is matched for depression. Rates of PTSD appear lower at first glance, closer to 1 in 10 when including complex PTSD. But this needs to be interpreted carefully. Firefighters with the most severe symptoms are often off sick or no longer in service. So these figures are likely an underestimate rather than reassurance, I would say. And very quickly, burnout was also a major concern, with just under half of firefighters reporting moderate to high levels of burnout. And again, that matters because burnout isn't just about feeling tired. It's linked to emotional exhaustion, reduced empathy, mistakes at work, sickness absence, and people leaving the service altogether.
Okay, and in terms of getting people to respond to the survey, we see you had a target of 10,000. What were the issues with getting survey respondents, and particularly in London, as there seemed to be... Oh, you are still online. Sorry, the screens have gone a bit funny. But what were the main challenges in getting people to respond to the survey?
I wish I knew exactly the answer to these questions. I have to admit the survey was really long, so we prioritized validated measures every time one was available. And because we were trying to do this survey as the first of its kind, we wanted it to be as comprehensive as possible. So the survey was quite long. We also did look at mental health, which of course is a topic that is stigmatized and not everybody feels comfortable discussing. So my guess is, one, it was quite long, and two, not everybody wanted to complete the survey.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll hand back to the chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
Can I just back up on those particular questions? Did we find out during with this survey? Did you ask the question, do you have another job?
Yeah.
And so what percentage of people with an additional job had mental health issues?
More. We haven't specifically looked at that quite yet. The data collection is completed, but we're still completing that analysis. But more of half of the participants had at least one additional job.
Yeah, because you see, and I do understand why. I'm not. That's not the point of my questioning. The thing is, you've mentioned lack of sleep, you've mentioned burnout. If some of these firefighters have one or two other jobs, then that could be contributing to the lack of sleep or burnout. Lack of sleep, certainly, if they've got another daytime part-time job. If they're then on a shout all one night, they'll lose a whole night's sleep. So I would suggest that actually finding out if there's any connection with that, especially as you mentioned burnout, that could be a clue there that possibly we should be looking into.
Well, we can definitely look into that. Consider that we did ask participants what they thought were the causes of their poor sleep, and they didn't mention additional jobs. They mentioned shift work pattern, and mental health. So that's what I can comment on right now.
With respect, I doubt that they would mention it could be down to their second job or third job. They wouldn't mention that, would they? I'm just looking at the amount of money it's costing the fire brigade with people off sick. Obviously, the brigade has got to do something about that. And it just occurred to me, if you're looking at burnout and lack of sleep, then that's something that we need to be looking at, surely.
I guess, yes, correct. I imagine most people do an additional job, not because they wouldn't rather be sleeping, but because they're in need of doing an additional job. So this is one of the things that surely needs to be considered, but it's difficult to change, I would imagine.
I completely understand why they would do another one, but we're looking at the causes of extra stress, lack of sleep and burnout, and therefore I would suggest that this could be partly to do with it. Maybe not. It would be right to assume that it's something we should perhaps look at. Can I ask Professor Rowena, what's your view on that?
So from the surveys and the work that we've done, so I've been involved over the last 6 years in some hefty big pieces of work, I suppose, both with the Firefighters Charity, who I believe you're hearing from later, and also the National Fire Chiefs Council. There seems to, I think, when we talk about burnout, our next wave of data that we're collecting with our surveys includes something called moral injury. I'm not quite sure if the members are aware, but I think some of that burnout, depression, anxiety is burnout, depression, anxiety, but some of that I perceive and other researchers are perceiving from other critical occupations would be moral injury. So we're looking at that a little bit more. That's around where some of the morals and the values of the individual are compromised in some way from the asks or the situation of the organisation and how different people engage in different job tasks. So an example of that that we see in America, for example, is if you've asked to kind of protect life, but actually big pharma and insurance companies are asking you to think about patients in a different way. That's where we see the morals and ethics a little bit. Where we see things like home fire safety visits, where we see a lot particularly in the qualitative data coming from the different studies around our firefighters and other Green Book staff and non-operational fire staff, engagement with the public. They're seeing a lot of people slipping through different cracks within statutory obligations, or where they see some significant need that can't be met. That's where we find that moral injury. So some of the burnout I believe might actually be moral injury that we're hearing. There's quite a lot of noise around a lot of that data around burnout. With regards to second jobs, we didn't necessarily particularly ask that in our survey because our survey was particularly around the whole of that individual. So we asked around things like job satisfaction, life satisfaction, resilient coping, work engagement, intention to quit, those kind of things. So we were trying to understand the context of the individual and then the context of the organisation.
Okay, all right, I'll go on to my next question. So I can start with you, Daniel, if that's all right. What are the main mental health challenges faced by those working in the fire service, and how does this differ based on roles and seniority? And I can ask all of you that.
So I think probably Rowena will be better placed than I will to answer that specific question because my research has been around other sort of frontline workers and moral injury in particular. So I'm really pleased that Rowena mentioned that. I think I'll sort of pass the
if you don't know the
specific question over.
I completely understand. I was trying to give you a
if it's okay, I'll just say something quickly on moral injury because I think that is a really relevant issue here. And what we've seen in NHS cohorts that I've done research about and lots of other frontline services, so staff working in prisons, staff working in universities, staff working in teaching, in journalism. Moral injury is now a syndrome in the diagnostic manuals of DSM-5. It's not a diagnosis, so it's not a mental health diagnosis, but it's a syndrome. Which means that you wouldn't go to a psychiatrist and be diagnosed with moral injury, but it can lead to diagnosable mental health disorders. And it's a really prevalent thing in the military, so that's where the term was originated. It's now been used, especially since the pandemic, very much in healthcare, and so most people working in healthcare will be aware of the term moral injury. You've maybe heard it as well. I think for firefighters, it's a really relevant concept. I think in firefighters, it's more likely that the pattern of moral injury or moral distress is going to be more similar to the military than the NHS, because the population in the fire brigade are majority male, which is similar to the military, whereas the population in healthcare is majority female. And we see slightly different patterns in the different populations. And I would suspect, although I haven't done any research on this myself, that it will be more similar to the military. Having said that, because of the differences between what the military are doing and what firefighters are doing, it may be that it's not quite the same as the patterns in the military. And one thing that we've seen in healthcare workers particularly is that there are very high levels of betrayal-based moral injury. So moral injury typically is considered as three different aspects: omission, commission and betrayal. The commission bit is easy. That's, you've done something that you feel you shouldn't have done. The omission bit is where you've failed to stop something terrible from happening, or that something that clashes with your own values from happening. And the betrayal aspect is where you feel as though you've been betrayed by either a more senior figure in the hierarchy or even at an institutional or societal level. So during the pandemic, we saw a lot of moral injury in healthcare staff, and a lot of that was betrayal and people feeling as though they'd been betrayed by more senior members of staff and actually by government to a large extent. And in longitudinal work that we've done of individual interviews with people, one of the biggest things we've seen over time is that when you don't address betrayal in the first instance, it compounds, and we're seeing this kind of developed betrayal in moral injury where you haven't addressed that. I think that will also be important for firefighters.
I think the worry here is there's so many different aspects of so many different things now. We'll be lucky getting anybody to do any jobs at all. It's a concern because the job of firefighting is not easy. I mean, at all. But all these new syndromes and everything else is of concern to us, and we need people to be out there putting the fires out.
Absolutely. Just if I could just add one very quick thing about...
because this isn't the actual question.
Yeah, sorry. About interventions to address moral injury. There are a number of different interventions that are being developed in different populations, different occupational populations to address moral injury. And a lot of those are showing quite a lot of promise. So things like peer support, reflective practice, things like that. And I think being upfront and honest with staff at the very start, so in training, in induction, about what they might expect to face, that can be really helpful in mitigating some of the moral injury that you might see.
Yeah, well, peer support is something that firefighters definitely have. They have wonderful units, and that's why they never want to give up the way they work, because they're wonderful units. Does anybody else actually want to answer what are the main mental health challenges faced by those working in the fire service, and how does that differ based on the roles of seniority? Has anybody answered?
I'm happy to comment on that.
Sorry?
I'm happy to comment on that, if I can go.
Okay, I'll take you first then, Rowena. Thank you, Rowena.
When we talk about stress in the fire service, it's really important to move beyond the idea this is just about attending fires, because the role has changed and the stressors have changed with it. In London in particular, firefighters now attend relatively few fires compared to other types of incidents. In our survey, nearly 3/4 of participants said that less than 25% of calls they attend are fires. The most common calls involve false alarms, rescues, road traffic collisions, water incidents like drowning, and a significant number of mental health-related incidents involving suicide risk or severe distress. These incidents might not involve flames, but they are emotionally demanding, especially when they happen over many years. Add to that long service lengths, high call volumes, and a largely whole-time workforce, and you have sustained exposure with very little opportunity to properly decompress. And in terms of organizational and cultural stressors, around half of the respondents said they would feel comfortable talking to peers about mental health, since we mentioned peer support, but roughly only 1 in 4 would feel comfortable raising concerns with management. With a substantial proportion worrying about career progression or negative consequences if they disclose mental health difficulties, and 1 in 4 would feel uneasy naming mental health as the reason for absence. Perceived organizational support is also quite mixed. While most know there are policies in place, far fewer feel confident about how these policies work in practice, particularly around bullying, harassment, and complaints, with a very small numbers believing outcomes are transparent, impartial, and timely. Rather than interpreting this as the organization not caring, which I'm not saying is the case, I would frame this as a disconnect between tension and experience. So what the data suggests is that a substantial proportion of firefighters perceive that their goals and values are not always aligned with the organization priorities. That kind of perception can emerge even when well-being policies exist, simply because operational demands and performance targets understandably take center stage.
Okay.
So I wouldn't see this as a failure of values, just to conclude, but as a communication and implementation gap, which is faced by many large organizations. The positive reading is that it highlights where relatively small visible changes in leadership behavior and feedback could make a meaningful difference to how supported people feel.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything to add to that, Rowena?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, the literature's been quite biased over the years, primarily because funders have commissioned people like us to do work on trauma, because we know that the Fire and Rescue Service have exposure to trauma, and therefore we have in my view, an over-representation of trauma literature that informs us of the Fire and Rescue Service. When we look at things more broadly, so we have occupational kind of stressors and we have traumatic stressors. The occupational stressors are the thing time and time again through any form of kind of methodological study that comes back as being the one that is probably of most concern. That isn't to take away any traumatic reactions that anybody has. They need to be dealt with and supported. But I think with regards to the different levels of management, through our work, we've seen both in through all of the different studies that we've done, there is a bit of a tipping point or a void when somebody progresses through to a flex duty officer. And that's primarily, you made the observation earlier on, that actually the teamwork that watches have, when it works, to a T, any intervention would want that kind of support. That social support, the teamwork support, the close co-worker network comes out time and time again as the most supportive structure that we can have. When it's bad, it's really impactful on those individuals. What we then have for operational staff is, apart from those who join us direct entry further up, we have a group that predominantly operate their coping strategies as a group. Then all of a sudden they're being turned out of their beds at 3 a.m. and they're going back to their beds at 5:45 a.m. And they don't necessarily have those same understandings of those same rehearsals of how they can use each other in that peer support way. And so our next stage of work that we're undertaking is really looking at those flexi duty officer roles. So I would say that there is quite a significant difference between our managerial staff to our operational staff with regards to how we understand what those stresses are, but crucially, the resources they have to hand themselves and through the organisation within which they can deal with those effectively.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder whether that, I mean, very often this has been posed. I mean, I expect to get a load of abuse for even suggesting this, but if they didn't get up and go and do the job and then go back to bed, if they used it as a proper work time, like the police are up all night, do you think that that would help with the mental health issues, because they'd then be sitting around the table discussing it as opposed to going straight back to bed?
I think that would be dependent, from my point of view, on the social health. So we talk about well-being as kind of psychological health, social health, and also physical health. The social health, the belongingness and the connectedness and the richness of that as humans, we're social animals. We need that to be healthy. That changes in its dynamic. And I think that we don't necessarily see any patterns of that. I think that transition to being a manager and a flexi duty officer, some of those transitions are really quite tricky. I think that both the shift pattern changes, your commitment, your working pattern changes, how your family is dealing with that at home, because the family is part of this, all changes. And so there's so much that feels unfamiliar that actually trying to connect in a cohort to try and get trusted people that you can sit with and say, this is feeling a bit odd to me and I don't understand why, is quite a revealing and brave thing to do, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's not often been picked up, because they are in such a unit and then suddenly they're in charge of that unit, and it's a massive thing to pick up. I think very briefly, Carolina wants to come back in, but if it could be brief, because the questions.
Yes, since peer support came up, I just wanted to agree that peer support is a real strength in the fire service. Our findings clearly indicate that peers should complement professional care, not replace it. So where peer support works well, it's recognized formally, properly trained, given protected time and supported by supervision. Without that, those doing the caring often burn out themselves.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll leave it there. The next one's really been answered.
Thank you. Assembly Member Clark.
Thank you. I think I'll come to Danielle on this, but if somebody else wanted to answer, that's also okay. There's so many experts on this panel in mental health. Just in terms of Obviously, firefighting comes with additional stressors, and there's differences to this role than there are to many other professions. And when we think about sort of suicide prevention in stressful environments, what do you think is needed in the fire service in particular to prevent suicide, but also to stop people getting to the point where they would need suicide prevention?
And I think Rowena has actually covered quite a lot of this, but I mean, just to say again, the importance of the immediate team around you and your immediate line manager is hugely important in any profession, but particularly in these kinds of very high pressure and high risk roles. So I think, yeah, everything that Rowena said, I would absolutely agree with there. In terms of not getting to that point, I mean, I think the culture and the sort of social aspects of team working, if it's done well, if it's going well, means that your colleagues, your manager should hopefully pick up on something being wrong earlier rather than later. But if that's not working so well, then having other staff who can be aware of what's happening, who maybe aren't part of the team themselves, but who are there available to support staff members, can be really important. Confidentiality, we know, is a really big issue for a lot of people in these kinds of roles. So feeling safe to tell people, actually, I'm really struggling and I'm thinking about, you know, whether I still want to be around. That's a really big thing to say to someone, and having the support available that, you know, you can say that without someone going back to your team or your manager and saying, oh, so-and-so is really struggling, like, I don't think they should be on shift, when actually you need the money, or, you know, you are coping okay at work. That can be really important. So, and I know there are various anonymous phone lines, there are various different support structures already for firefighters to call or to access if they want to. But I think that would be one of the most important aspects.
Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
The independent culture review of the London Fire Brigade states that whilst light-hearted banter certainly has its place and need in a stressful environment, it should not descend into vindictive bullying. Well, we can all agree with that. How does the NFB draw clear lines between light-hearted banter and bullying, and ensure that the right level is upheld? It must be so difficult within the watches. Do any of you have any ideas on that one?
So to speak to that, and I think to many of the other issues, it's about having the right policies and practices in place and making sure that when people do raise concerns of whatever nature, appropriate action is followed through. And I think with that line, where somebody is, often it can be in the eye of the beholder as well.
Yeah.
And ensuring that person is listened to and there is a fair and appropriate resolution of that concern is what's important. I think often, not only in the Fire Brigade, but in many organisations, and there's some interesting work that we've been doing, working with NHS Wales, looking at compassionate investigations and disciplinary processes, is often those processes are not necessarily set up for the best success for both parties. And so thinking about how we can put in informal avenues to address some of those concerns, how we can create that culture where respectful behaviour is normalised and people feel that they can voice any concerns around unacceptable behaviour, but also making sure that there's a really strong top-down message that filters through all aspects of line management is really key.
It's so difficult, though, isn't it? You could go to I've been to every single fire station, and people say, well, what's the environment like there? But because it depends on which watch you see as well. So sometimes they're noisy watches, sometimes they're older, and not necessarily have to be older, but they're more quiet, they're quieter and more respectful. And sometimes they're like families, and we all know families can suddenly blow up and then it be all right. It's so very difficult to to draw a line in the right place, isn't it? Because the line might be in a slightly different place in every single watch. So how on earth do you cope with that?
And I think it also talks to the point that it's not a one endeavour. So it's a whole organisation endeavour, and it's also a continuous process. So it's something that needs to be part of the fabric of everyday conversations around what are acceptable behaviours and how are people responding when people are raising concerns.
Do you find more acceptable behaviours in younger people, in as much as they've been brought up to know more, that's right, that's wrong, whereas older generations, and I can say this, we used to say all sorts of things and genuinely not think about possibly the impact that had, because that's just what happened. So do you think as the younger generation are coming through, behaviours will be slightly different?
I wouldn't say that there's evidence to really suggest either way, and Rowena will probably speak to some more of the evidence, but certainly in the interviews that I was party to as part of the culture review, and from other sectors that we work with across mining, across policing, I would say that may be the case in terms of general understanding of what is acceptable and not, but certainly there are younger people who are exhibiting unacceptable behaviours, and those workplace dynamics can really exacerbate that. And when people don't have strong role models to help them understand what is acceptable and not, then very quickly those that are coming into the organisation can start to model those behaviours. So I don't think that age in itself has a role to play necessarily, but more how the team is operating.
All I know is it's very difficult. I know Carolina wants to come in again.
I think we might also want to consider...
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon.
Go on.
Sorry, it's so difficult when somebody's online. And who wanted to come in first?
Rowena wanted to come in.
Sorry, Rowena, and then I'll come to you, Carolina. Sorry.
Thank you. Just quickly, in response to that, there's some work undergoing at the moment by Professor Noreen Tehrani, and both in policing and also in fire, around understanding how the healthy, productive coping mechanism of humour, how we can boundary that and manage that so that that doesn't become offensive, either to colleagues or to survivors and families of victims. So that work's currently ongoing, I think, up with one of the Yorkshire Brigades services. The other aspect, I think, is that there is quite a lot of academic work at the moment trying to understand how bullying becomes, how banter becomes bullying. Both online and also, and that's where we see some of the younger behaviours around professional contexts and online sharing of images and online behaviours. We might see a difference in that with regards to the age. So I just want to say those two things. And with regards to managing it, there is some good practice that you might want to look at with regards to culture. With Dr. Tom Simcock looked at how you can co-produce a culture with an organisation so that actually you get inclusive, unheard voices, and also it becomes a joint endeavour rather than an imposed, this is where the parameters are. That is so hard when you've got different expressions of connectedness and belonging that are expressed in different ways by different teams. That could be the finance team versus Blue Watch in wherever. So yeah, just wanted to add that, but I know we're short on time, so I'll leave it there.
No, it's interesting, and I don't know that we'll ever come up with an ideal answer because people are involved. So, there's characters there, etc. Carolina?
Yes, we could look at how often it happens. If a colleague is asked to stop with their comments and they don't, if comments focus on protected characteristics or consistently target the same colleagues over and over. In our survey, where bullying and harassment were reported, that the impact was significant and included not just emotional distress and job dissatisfaction, but people considering leaving the service altogether. The most common barrier to reporting was fear of repercussion, particularly linked to management and lack of trust in the system, as firefighters are afraid their concerns might not be addressed or even believed.
Well, I mean, the good thing about that is something that could be fixed, isn't it? Easier than some of the other things that have been thrown up. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Assembly Member Cooper in a moment for the final section. Joe, I'm just aware that you've spoken a little bit less. For a specific question, are there any specific stresses around the fire brigade that you think are gaps or are not being addressed? Oh, sorry.
One of the I wouldn't say that the fire service is an area of expertise for me, so I work across sector, and I think we see very, very similar stresses in regard to everyday working practices, and I think I'd encourage the Assembly to really think about, yes, specific stresses and trauma being very, very much part of what should be considered, but also not to lose sight of good work and what that means. So thinking about the HSE management standards for work-related stress and what comprises good work when we think about work demands, the variation of work demands, and how people are supported to upskill in the demands that are required of them. So, for example, somebody being recruited into the fire service may have that realistic job preview of, I'm going to be working on fires, I'm going to be maybe going out to the community, but do they really understand the breadth of the role in the community? And different people have different needs, different preferences, different skill sets. How are we upskilling people to do the job that's required for them? And then, as Rowena mentioned, thinking about line managers and the really vital role they play, are we equipping them not only with awareness? So I see lots of organisations are equipping line managers with the awareness of what stress is, what mental health is, but what we see from our research of what predicts absence and also what supports effective returns is where managers have the behaviours to support people through difficult conversations, where they have behaviours that can really help plan forward work and help people respond to their work and non-work experiences. And so we've done quite a lot of work with the Health and Safety Executive and other organisations looking at those key management competencies, and I'd really encourage the fire service to look at that as well, to embed into management practices. And then overarching that, I think, is reinforcing the policies and practices. So one thing that we see across sector is often those that are using the policies are not able necessarily always to read them or to interpret them. And so if we think about some of the behaviours that you really want to see from your firefighters and support staff, are those workers actually able to access those policies and expectations in a way that's communicated to them? So, for example, reading age, looking at translating information in different mediums, different ways of communicating some of your messages so that it's really accessible. And therefore, some of the concerns that you have around unacceptable behaviours and so on are not just in a policy that's written by a graduate on the internet somewhere, but they are really lived and breathed through the organisation.
Thank you, I've done it now. Thanks, Leonie. In a separate investigation at the moment, we've been looking into fire contaminants. We went to visit some fire stations and we heard stories, this was long ago, that of firefighters going into a fire and not coming back smoky enough, in inverted commas, and kind of rubbing on their face because there was that need to kind of, when they go home to their family, to show they've worked really hard that day. How hard is it to get into the evidence of that's a very particular type of behaviour? And I don't know if that's very particular to firefighting. For kind of, I can understand if you've got into the fire brigade, you might want to demonstrate that it was a really, really important day's work compared to some of the other emergency services. And how can you start to measure that sort of data?
Thank you. I suppose I'd welcome Carolina's thoughts on this, but I understand that to be social norms. And changing social norms within the culture of an organisation isn't insurmountable, but it's quite tricky. If you're having messages from your organisation that actually your public needs being met is the overarching priority of this organisation, then and everything around that is scaffolded and steered in that direction, then you tend to see that people will start to, over time, and it is a 15-year kind of, steerage period, to try and align with that, or to understand what their role is. I think that for me brings up questions of things like meaningful work and job satisfaction and job engagement, and what that means for firefighters. So yeah, I suppose I'd leave it there and ask Carolina to come in, because her work's much more focused around that. Mine's much more holistic. So
that makes total sense. Thank you, Carolina.
I'm mostly confirmed with the majority of what has been said so far. I can confirm indeed that while most firefighters know that there are policies, most don't know what the policies actually say. In terms of upskilling, interestingly, more than 3/4 of firefighters said that they would be interested in more mental health training. And following on what Rowena just said about job satisfaction and morale, we found that those were quite mixed and fragile. While many firefighters still report a strong sense of purpose and pride in their role, satisfaction with morale, optimism about the future within the service, and trust in organizational support was much, much lower. And that combination of high commitment but low optimism is a risk factor for burnout and disengagement ultimately.
Thank you very much. And Danielle.
Sorry, if I could just very quickly add something to what Carolina said there about mental health training and the majority of firefighters saying they want more mental health training. I'd be really interested to know if that's more mental health training for their role in terms of them supporting people with mental health needs, or whether that's mental health training for themselves in how to cope with the pressures of their own role. And just to say one thing in terms of if you're thinking about interventions and training to upskill occupational groups in their knowledge and understanding of mental health. There are obviously lots of interventions. So mental health first aid is quite a popular one that is brought in as training. I would say for those kinds of interventions, there's very little evidence about whether or not they actually have an impact on improving mental health, or whether they have a very short-term impact on perhaps understanding about particular mental health disorders, but there isn't any strong evidence that they actually impact the kinds of outcomes that I think you'd be interested in terms of reducing sickness absence, in terms of reducing prevalence of mental health problems in a particular occupational group. So I would be a little bit careful about recommending bringing in that kind of training just because of the lack of evidence. That's not to say that it's not helpful, it's just an awareness about the level of evidence we have at the moment about those kinds of interventions.
Thank you. I've seen an indication from Rowena, but I just want to see, Carolina, did you want to come back there if you were talking about self-mental help or to support others?
So it's both, because we did the national survey, and in the national survey, that's where I found that number I was referring to, about the 3/4 of firefighters wanting more mental health, and that referred to themselves. And I believe that even if not improving mental health, simply knowing that, almost 80% of the force wants more mental health might improve job satisfaction and help with what I was mentioning before, the fact that firefighters don't always believe like the organization cares about what they want. But I also agree it's important to consider training from managers, because we did a Delphi study where basically we brought together experts in supporting mental health firefighters and try to reach consensus about what best practices would look like. And training for managers, it's one of the things that came up the most, with the understanding that training shouldn't be a one-off mental health first aid or first sort of thing, but should be continued and not just a tick box.
Thank you. I'm Rowena.
Thank you. From our work and our national survey, I think firefighters, managers, everybody wanted more understanding of how it's not necessarily training, but how they can make mental health more better, positive, and protect well-being. That said, there is also, I think, quite a clear need from other research, exactly as Danielle was saying, around the mental health of the community, because that's where we get into that moral injury area. So there's some work going on at the moment. Fireside 2 is a project that's just started at the moment around how fire and rescue service and what's their role in understanding when they're on their home safety visits, how they engage in the public and the communities. One of the things that I would say from our own work is that any implementation of interventions needs everybody to be aware of their own mental health. That is not, I repeat, not me saying it is the responsibility of the individual to fix themselves in a more resilient, in a less resilient world. That's not what I'm saying at all. But understanding how you're feeling. Am I feeling different to a year ago? How are these transitions through life? You know, I've moved, I've got divorced, my relationship is breaking down. How am I feeling in context to this is the individual's responsibility to understand and engage with. That said, it's really quite tricky. And as humans, we're quite poor at it on the whole. So I think that's where I think the wise words around some of those interventions around, you know, we've brought in this intervention, everything's okay, is there is a big kind of warning there as well. And also, not necessarily for London, but for other services, the range of interventions they're able to bring in, they're significantly limited by the resource envelope that they're currently within.
And presumably the harder things are going for you, the harder it is to self-check in. So I was thinking before with the Assembly Member Hall, like if you're not being paid the amount you need to be paid to pay your rent or whatever it is or support your family, so you have to take a second job, there's kind of the guilt of that plus the lack of sleep. And then it's not a surprise that people then get into a cycle where it's harder to ask for help.
Yes, and I would also say that actually Councilman Clark was talking about that earlier on as well. So the best prevention death by suicide policy is a good health and wellbeing policy. And so where we're asked, and Joss will talk about this later on, I'm sure, you know, what's the magic bullet to stop death by suicide? It's actually understanding that there isn't one thing. It is a progression. It is a series of stages and issues that somebody is facing that accumulatively means that this isn't a choice. This isn't. It is a level of burdensome that we think at the moment the current literature is suggesting, and then a series of life situations that accumulate to somebody feeling that that is the only option left. It's not a choice too. Do you see what I mean? Which is where the language change comes from in the literature as well.
Thank you. I've got Joe and then Carolina. Joe.
Thank you. So just two very quick points to that. So we're doing some work with the Health and Safety Executive at the moment, which will be published spring or summer, I think. And one of the things that we've been looking at there is how do health professionals and organisations label stress and mental health. And I think what is very important for us as employers to recognise, and those supporting our workforces, is that we might see on a medical certificate, on a fit note, that somebody is experiencing work-related ill health or mental health. But that often doesn't really fully describe the broad accumulation of life and work risks that they're being exposed to. So that's important for us to keep in mind, is that it's always more complex than one thing. And then second to the impact of interventions is we did some work for the World Health Organization looking at what are the barriers and facilitators to intervention effectiveness. And I'd really encourage any intervention that is taken forward to really consider the context, so bespoking to the context rather than off-the-shelf solutions, but also really making sure that there is this co-development of the intervention to really meet your needs. I think particularly in this area, and particularly given the broad range of different risks that people are exposed to, having that would not only ensure that you've got that good coverage, but also ensure that your people have bought in to the intervention and want to do it, and it fits with everyday work.
Thank you. And Carolina.
I'm glad to see we seem to all agree actually on this point. When we talk about mental health training for firefighters or psychoeducation, if you like to call it that, of course, we're not expecting firefighters to become therapists, but to be able to notice early signs of distress in themselves and others, since the peer support is so important, have confident, supportive conversations and know how and when to escalate. And just again, to confirm what my colleague just said, the important bit is that training needs to be practical, ideally face-to-face and grounded in real fire service scenario, not just online modules that people sort of like put on the laptop and then they forget about. Training that works best tend to be experiential, relatable, and embedded across the career lifespan and not one-off or voluntary.
Thank you. Assembly Member Cooper.
Okay, we seem to be going sort of into the area of what I was going to ask about, which was best practice. And I wanted to start with you, Rowena, if that's okay. Your research has identified the need for this holistic approach to well-being from someone who's just a new starter in the fire brigade right through to people who have gone into retirement. What would that ideally look like, and what are the risks if this type of holistic strategy, holistic approach is not adopted by the brigade?
Thank you. Yes. So you're right. Our research looked at kind of people coming into a fire and rescue service in any form of kind of employment, and all the way through transitioning into retirement. We've also done some work on that was really quite was a very robust piece of work. I think for that holistic approach, it's around. And I understand why we talk about it in those ways, but where we talk about kind of health and well-being policies or mental health approaches, you can't disaggregate that in any way from leadership, from culture, from kind of organisational development, from want of a better word. All these things are inclusivity, for example. All those things are interwoven because they all impact on us as individuals. So I think the essence of kind of some of the things that we've already been discussing, as you kind of pointed out already, understanding what that leadership role is, what the individual's role is, and how that wrap around with the organisation of recognising those individuals not just as employees, but actually they have lives, they have children, they have parents that are ageing, they have that wider, and that's not necessarily to say the Fire and Rescue Service can do anything about that or fix it, but it's about being a sympathetic, empathetic employer and understanding, particularly through points of transition, for example, things like promotion panels. We saw quite a lot of challenge there around people understanding why they haven't got roles, how those transitions or how those processes were run. It's ultimately it's being kind. That sounds really reductionist, but that's essentially what it is. It's kindness, it's belonging, and it's a sense of community, which any organisation struggles to do because they're so vast and large, and they have to have levels of hierarchy. So it's the reflection of how can a group of individuals come together and look after themselves and look after each other, should be kind of a bit of a backbone of all of the different policies. And I understand that sounds quite idealistic, but it's the reality of what the evidence keeps saying to us every time is that peer support, is the interest in one another, it's the being valued, the being seen, and turning up to work and nobody's really noticed that actually, you know, I'm on a disciplinary, my marriage is breaking down, we're trying to move house, but that doesn't look like it's going forward. You know, those kind of understandings of do I see you and do I value you as a colleague? Am I interested? Am I asking? And am I looking out? And also that individual, am I being reflective and saying, do you know what, things are a bit tough for me at the moment. How can you help? And also understanding how services sometimes don't have the answer to everything, and they do need a multi-agency or multi-stakeholder approach. So where the firefighters charity, where academia, where all of those different vested interested parties who want to work with them desperately, not for monetary gain, but for the greater good to see that achieving, is trying to understand where all of those different moving parts and that coordination can occur. What we tend to see is that they're subcontracted out to different decision-making committees that are dissecting those different elements, and then it's delivered to an individual as a series of different aspects. It's about how to cohese that, which is not, by any stretch of the imagination, an easy task.
Isn't there something here that isn't just labelled kindness, that is to do with people who are line managers, and whether that's someone who heads a watch, a station commander, a borough commander, whoever it is, that they have been well trained in how to manage people in a way that is actually not just instructing them in what they should be doing, but is supporting them as they fulfil their role but also live their life, which is what you're describing, and obviously everybody does that. And doesn't that require a degree of active listening to what people are saying? So I was struck with Joe was saying, people need to come forward and report things, but there's not much point coming forward and reporting something if the person you report it to is either not listening to you or is listening but isn't understanding what you're trying to say to them. Isn't it not more about good leadership, good management, rather than just kindness? I'm going to bring you in a second, Joe, because I can see you're desperate to come in as well.
Absolutely. That's what I mean about being seen. Am I heard? Am I understood? And even if, depending on the context or the situation, do I understand that I've been treated fairly and appropriately and equitably? And how is my organisation set up for me to be able to do that, have those interactions, is absolutely part of that, yeah.
And to feel comfortable in doing that. I'm going to bring you in now, Joe. Thanks, Verena.
Thank you. And I think all of
Can you make sure you just lean forward to the microphone?
Oh, sorry. And I think all of the things that Verena was describing sit really well under a piece of work that we've been doing over the last while, which has been looking at how do we communicate this shared responsibility in a really accessible way. So we've been looking at the embedding of the IGLOO framework. So if as an organisation we think of individuals' responsibility, the group's responsibility to each other, the line manager or leader's responsibility, the organisation and the outside actors, so charities, government, welfare service and so on, if we look at each problem through that shared responsibility lens, we can then make sure that we aren't having things falling through the gaps. So absolutely a leader that is trained in specific behaviours, if the leader is trained incredibly well, but the organisational systems don't support that or don't give permission for them to take action, or indeed when there is poor behaviour, those behaviours aren't addressed, then that in itself is a challenge. So it needs to be across each of those IGLOO levels that we have a position really and upskill people at the relevant level. But also I think there needs to be integration. So in talking about what does a really good system look like, one of the things that we see through our practice is that many of these different areas work in silos. So health and safety might not talk to occupational health, might not talk to HR. And so thinking about how we get an integrated approach to really support the people with their health and well-being is vital. And so thinking about that system operating, disciplinary practices, health and safety practices, training and induction, how does that all come together? And how do we make sure that we're looking at not only the IGLOO lens, but the cross-policy lens as well?
Because you see, I think the fire service works it has amazing teamwork. And there's no way that you would send people onto the fire ground and, blue watches on the fire ground and, they've never spoken to each other. Half of them don't know how to use breathing apparatus. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know, where they should be, how to work together as a team when they're there. That would never happen because there's a lot of training that goes on. Is the same attention, the same need for training in how to also be a manager as you progress from being an ordinary firefighter to being a leading firefighter to leading a watch to being a station commander to being a borough commander? Are we doing enough, do you think, to encourage that in the fire brigades so that the same level of skill that is brought to the fire ground is brought to managing your team?
So I would say that definitely needs to happen. So putting attention on developing and also, and I think going back to the point that was made around not just one-off training, it's support and development over time and having
there is absolutely no way there'd be one-off training for going to the fire ground. So
exactly.
There's refresher training goes on all the
time.
time. So I think the fire service is very up for that.
And also I think thinking about the time that we allocate to managers and to these conversations. So thinking about how much of a proportion of is actually dedicated to people management. And we know that across sector, actually we don't really take very seriously the amount of time that managers need to manage the individual concerns, or indeed how that's built into everyday working practice. So how much time do individuals have to pause and reflect on what's going well for them, not often very much.
Yeah, and sometimes there's quite a lot to pause and reflect on, isn't there? Especially if you've spent a lot of time on particular incidents. Danielle, you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, I agree with everything that Joe said there, and particularly in the need for ongoing training. I do think it's worth considering the fact that not everyone is a natural people leader. And what we see in some other professions, so healthcare in particular, where, for example, nurses, the only way to get promoted is to get into a more management kind of role. And actually, what they're really good at is being a nurse. But the only way that they can go up the pay grade is by becoming a manager. And actually, they're not a very good manager. We've done interviews with lots and lots of nurses who say that they've got to a point where they don't feel as though actually they're as good a manager as they were a nurse. But that's the only way to increase their pay. And I think that's worth considering in all kinds of occupations, the kinds of pay structures and the kinds of rewards that we give people or that people are able to access. That maybe the scale doesn't account for you being an absolutely incredible firefighter. It doesn't account for that. You have to go into a management role where actually maybe you're not a very good manager, and all the training in the world isn't going to make you as good a manager as perhaps you need to be.
I think the same very much applies to teaching, because
Absolutely.
the higher up the teaching pay grade you go, the less time you spend actually in the classroom with the children.
Indeed.
And there are teachers who actually want to spend all their time in the classroom, and that impedes their salary progression, exactly as you described.
Absolutely, and there's evidence about those kinds of role progressions being really positive, obviously, for some people, but actually not for others. But if you don't have flexibility in the system to reward people for what they're actually good at, you lose the people from the thing that they're really good at, because they quite naturally want progression in their careers.
Bringing it back to the fire brigade from teaching and nursing just for a second, because that's really what we're here to discuss. I mean, there is this issue of this incredible closeness of the watches. And anyone who spends any time in the mess room at any fire station will immediately notice that they are with a set of people who know each other well, work together well. Sometimes there will be banter that is, something that you may not enjoy listening to. Hopefully less and less of that is happening. But it does mean that sort of very close operation, that there could be, different watches working from the same fire station that operate in very different ways. How do we address that as an issue? How do we get consistency when we've got that really tight teamwork, but sometimes it does lead to an inability to break down bad practice, shall we say? I'm Rowena first then, because she's put her hand up first.
I think this is something that comes up across all of my work. It comes across community work as well. When we have groups that are operating to meet the needs of what they're tasked to do, but also their own needs as well, by the very nature, they won't look and operate the same. They won't. Their interactions won't look the same. The way in which they communicate won't sound the same. And I think sometimes when we're looking at that kind of group level, we have to be comfortable that actually the consistency might be about how they report, or it might be around the size that they are or the tasks that they do. But it constantly comes back, and it's kind of the butting up against policy is how do you make something manageable, because we need it to be consistent in order to be manageable and to have policy application to it. But actually, by the very definition of its meeting, it's at a hyper micro level, it needs to express and be different to each other. And that, I think, at some point, we have to be comfortable that that's what we're doing, and just do that knowingly and put appropriate reporting structures and mechanisms in place to make sure that if there's anything going on that's untoward in that space and within that team, that actually there is appropriate mechanisms for somebody to express that.
Well, that's interesting. So there should be enough flexibility in the organisation that Green Watch, Red Watch, Blue Watch can be different and high performing in their own way, providing they're within certain parameters overall. That should not matter. Is that okay? Danielle?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you've summarised it really well there. Flexibility, I think, is the key within structures and frameworks. And obviously, there are always going to be protocols that need to be followed in particular ways, but having that flexibility. And also, I think the other key word here is trust. You know, at some point we have to trust people to just get on and do their jobs in the way that they think is the best way to do, again, within those structures. And I think quite often, out of possibly fear of litigation or, the sort of the desire to have everything consistent so everything can be reported in the same way, large organisations can sort of damp down the individuality of teams that actually is the benefit. That can be a real benefit and a real value in having people doing things in slightly different ways and actually having teams learning from each other and sharing the way that they do it, not because everyone should do it in that way, but because it might work really well for this team as well. And so trusting people to get on, because most people, particularly in these kinds of professions, I think, want to do the job, they want to do the job well, and they don't want to not contribute. That they're there to contribute. So I think often we should just trust them to get on and do that, again, within those frameworks and protocols.
I think that's very positive. I think so long as it doesn't tip over into what Nazir Afzal found when he did his deep dive into the fire brigade, and that it also to get those sort of team bonds really strong, that people start becoming sort of othering people to, make them feel unwelcome in that context. But thank you very much. That's very interesting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Carolina in a moment for the final word. Before that, I want to welcome from Heber Primary School in Southwark, the School Council and the Eco Committee, very excitingly. Welcome, guys. We're talking about the fire brigade and how to keep them happy and healthy. And all the women you can see in front of you are academics and professors and doctors, including the lady on screen, who are giving us information about how people might be happy and healthy. And so far, I've really taken away kindness as well as good management is really important. Carolina.
Yeah, just to conclude, we talked about best practices, and the strongest and most consistent message seems to be that mental health support only works when it is treated as a core shared responsibility. It's very clear that systems based purely on signposting, helplines, or reactive response after major incidents are not enough on their own. So we discussed trauma-informed systems that normalize mental health conversation in everyday work rather than waiting for people to reach crisis point. Accessible and confidential support. I agree about the importance of peer support as long as it's recognized formally and supported. And I also agree that it's important for a manager to be good with active listening and actual understanding and overall making people feel seen. And this all requires upskilling and protected time for upskilling. I feel like London's scale, workforce size, and existing well-being infrastructure mean it is uniquely positioned to lead on embedded trauma-informed approaches and manager development. So the key message for me is that progress is not about introducing more initiatives. It's about integrating what already exists, resourcing it properly, and making it credible in day-to-day practice.
Thank you very much. And on that, thank you to all our guests for this morning's discussion. It's been excellent. We're now going to take a short adjournment to change guests. For time's 11:12, so we're going to be back at 11:17. But once again, thank you very much. And welcome back to the Fire Committee. We now continue our discussion into firefighter wellbeing. I'd like to welcome our second panel of guests to the Chamber this morning. First of all, returning many a time is Gareth Cook, London Regional Executive Lead Representative on Mental Health, Wellbeing and Workforce Culture at the Fire Brigade Union. Welcome back. We also have Spencer Sutcliffe, Deputy Commissioner and Operational Director for Prevention, Protection and Policy at the London Fire Brigade. Dr Adrian Bevan, the Assistant Director of Health and Safety and Wellbeing at the London Fire Brigade. Joss Gaynor, Director of Impact and Service Partnerships at the Firefighters Charity. And Dean Corney, Firefighter, London Fire Brigade and founder of Walk and Talk 999. To you all, a huge welcome. Gareth, if I can begin with you, the same question as to the last panel. Why are we seeing an increasing number of firefighters off work for prolonged periods of time due to stress, anxiety and depression?
Well, never to lead with too big a question there, Zach. Right. So there's a whole host of issues, but what I'll probably try and bring it into London initially, because that's what we're here for. So, I mean, it's only yesterday in the Evening Standard we see that it's the highest cost of living and we've got housing crisis and bits and pieces like that. So we've got the cost of living crisis, we've got the financial element that's on there. We've got the demographic of London. We've got, to put it in a whole host of ways, we've got a rise of things that we don't like, the rise of the right. We've got all sorts of bits and pieces that are really causing a lot of existential issues as well. In terms of firefighting itself, I think it's a more difficult time than ever before. 3 decades ago, firefighters would come to work. They understood that there was an expectation that they should keep themselves fit and well, ready for operational duty and trained and ready in, the right person, safe concept. I think the issue that we see now is if you haven't got a full grasp of what well-being versus wellness is and what that really applies to as a firefighter, and you're told that a number of things you may or may not be feeling could be this or could be that, it's a very difficult and complex field to navigate, because we're dealing with people who ultimately want to solutionise. They don't necessarily want to sit with ambiguity. They're fixers, they're rescuers. And so when we're in that space where we don't want to sit with ambiguity, we're fixers and rescuers, we start to get even more external pressures from our colleagues, from our peers, from the organisation itself. Why aren't you fit yet? Why aren't you well yet? Why aren't you? And so in that space, people then tend to withdraw. People then tend to say, I don't think this is for me. I don't feel like I'm fitting in here at the moment. And so in that space, are we seeing a truly representative figure of who is actually away from work through stress, anxiety, depression, or are we just seeing people withdraw? So that's kind of putting a question back to you in a way, but I hope that helps to answer it somewhat.
I think it's really helpful. Deputy Commissioner, I can put the same question to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to put it into a little bit of context. Our stress, anxiety and depression sickness rate is around low 2%, and that has actually been relatively stable for around the last 24 months. It increased in the years up to that, and I'm pleased to report that it is stable. So I would say that it's certainly not rising. Of course, it's a significant major concern for us. In the previous panel, there's obviously research that does point to emergency responders, and London is obviously the busiest service across the country, and living and often working in a 24/7 complex built environment can bring its own stresses. I think when the culture is not right and there's a stigma of mental health, or a stigma against mental health and a culture of stoicism, that's unhelpful. I think the London Fire Brigade has done an awful lot of work over the last particularly 3 or 4 years, and we've now got a comprehensive package. I'm sure we'll go into some detail with the panel shortly. So the focus now on more, as the previous panel I think concluded towards the end, it's around making sure that our staff are visible of all that support without necessarily adding more and more, because we have got a comprehensive package now. So I think it's stabilised. I don't think it's straightforward. And if I was bold enough to counter it, I would say that actually mental health hasn't necessarily increased over recent times. People are more open and honest about their mental health challenges now. So there's less stigma about reporting sickness around stress, anxiety, depression. So that naturally influences the numbers, not necessarily the actual occurrences of stress.
And just on the issue of data, we've had some evidence from the London Ambulance Service, and what they've been doing is using the data for occupational health to make sure the decisions they're making are being data-driven. Are you looking into doing something similar?
So we've always had relatively strong data around reporting of sickness, where people are being honest and it's being diagnosed correctly. One of the avenues that we want to improve going forward is a better understanding of the data, so we can target our responses of those at most at need, whether that's a certain demographic or a certain location. But data is always something we're trying to improve as we move forward.
Thank you. And then just finally for now, obviously, well, I say obviously, we won't talk about firefighters' mental health and sickness. I'm worried about the firefighter, but if we look at it from an economic point of view, it does cost for fire brigade a lot. What are you doing to bring these costs down?
So, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. There's a direct correlation. Some people put it at a figure around 4 to 1, so every £1 spent on prevention for mental health will give you a £4 return. So I think I hope there's a consensus that good mental health reaps rewards. We've got people that are happy at work, satisfied with their work, they're productive, they're high performing. So why wouldn't we support them in their mental health? I think a lot of the, and I think it was highlighted in many of the discussions in the previous panel, a lot of what can be done, really positive things around peer support, knowledge and understanding, doesn't necessarily have to come with a heavy price tag. I think we can do an awful lot without necessarily using extensive resources.
Thank you. Adrian, if I can move to you, going back to the original introductory question, what do you think is driving the increasing levels of stress or sickness?
Yeah, I think we saw from the panel discussion this morning that there's some uncertainty about what the relative contributions are from different factors. I think from our perspective, it's clear that there are a number of factors that we should focus on. So we know that firefighters are more likely to go to a traumatic event. We know that firefighters are more likely to suffer fear about occupational injury and occupational ill health. We know that they're involved in shift work. We know that they have secondary employment. We know that there are impacts on sleep, fatigue. So I think we know that there are risk factors and we know that we can concentrate on those. And that's basically where we do concentrate.
It's really helpful. Thank you. Joss, same question to you, please.
Thank you. I think our response kind of builds on some of the other panel members and obviously the panel members this morning. I think from our perspective as an independent charity, we're not in a position to kind of point to a single or multiple causal driver of this, but what we can speak to is what we see and what shows up in our services. And I think, you know, what we regularly see is people coming to us. We work with operational firefighters, control room staff, support staff, but also their wider family and retired, the retired community as well. And we see those individuals operating within the same wider social context that all of us do, where we're seeing that increasing mental health needs, lower access to statutory services and increasing thresholds for that support, as well as the kind of cost of living stresses that Gareth spoke to earlier. And I think for our community, that's layered with then those particular stresses that Adrian just spoke to for firefighters as well. And we see that kind of cumulative effect of all of those stresses layering on top of each other, and people coming to us often at a later stage than we would want to see them, because as the panel spoke to earlier, we know that that kind of earlier help does help prevent kind of worsening well-being outcomes as well. So I think for us, the experiences that we see coming to us is that there's a cumulative stress and emotional impact of that cumulative stress, that this is layered and not in isolation, but we do see a huge amount of resilience among our community as well to kind of meet that.
Thank you very much. And Dean, I'm going to acknowledge it's always hard to go fifth, but Is there anything you'd want to add?
No, I just think it's such a wide area, really. It's an individual journey, but as a firefighter, you know, we join this, we want to be there to help people. We're there at people's worst. You know, we're seen as the fixers, the rescuers. So I think you're always on a bit of a battle, whatever you put out there, on the fact that I fix things, I can't have someone fix it for me. So I think that's maybe why we sometimes see people, you know, reach for that help and support at later than, you know, in the general population. Yeah, it can be really hard. And also, you know, you've got other factors. Because we do like the job, if I get to a stage where I might need to take some absence from work, actually it's the job I love. It's the thing that gets me up. It's the thing that I feel keeps me going each day. So if I now know I need that extra time, it can be quite a hard thing to come forward and say, you know, I need to take some time off work. So actually I'm going to battle through till I get to a stage where I can't cope. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of factors, but I think there's a lot of things coming through, definitely of later years, that we're trying to offer more. One size don't fit all. I've particularly seen in our job where there's lots of different areas of support, clinical and non-clinical. So hopefully going forward in years to come, we will see more people using support earlier to not get to a stage where you need a leave of absence because it gets to that stage. And I think variety is the key. Rather than just offering, say, counselling, there's lots of other external support, you know, around sport, swimming, surfing, and a lot of it's targeted at emergency services. And we are getting that information out there slowly. Some more people utilising that, so hopefully going forwards, we'll see people using this earlier.
That summarised really well. Thank you very much, Dean. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. If I can start with you, Spencer. Does London Fire Brigade tailor its wellbeing and mental health support for the specific needs of each occupational group within the brigade?
Thank you, Assembly Member. The answer is yes and no. So
you cover everything by saying that.
So of course we have a very comprehensive well-being offer, and that's physical, mental health and social care, and that's available to all our staff. And in some cases, for example, our employee assistance programme, that's available also to immediate family members. So holistically, we treat everyone the same in a really positive way, but we're also conscious that different stresses impact different vocational groups. Certainly exposure to traumatic events is not isolated just to our operational staff or our firefighters. So we're very conscious of that. Firefighters may experience trauma in a different way to our senior officers that attend often a greater occurrence of what we would call critical or traumatic events, but they have a different role to play. Certainly our colleagues in control, we've probably all heard the examples of spending a considerable amount of time supporting someone with a fire survival guidance call. That is can be extremely stressful event. And then noting our kind of wider professional services are absolutely occupational stresses. Our fire rescue service staff last year went through a very unsettling period with our changes in some of the numbers in those teams, which was, you know, extremely impactful. So I think the offer is broadly the same. And what we've learnt over the years as well is one size doesn't fit all. No. Choice is really important. So if we recognise how different staff groups are potentially impacted, identify particular kind of trigger moments or points of concern. So post a critical incident for our operational staff, or unsettling times for our professional services, for example, and then offer them the choice, often within the brigade and also outside with our kind of partnerships and affiliated third sectors such as the firefighter charity. I think we then have most of our bases covered.
Good, because I mean, I'm coming to Gareth in a minute, but I mean, some of the things that Gareth's mentioned, like cost of living, accommodation in London and all that affects everybody in every walk of life. We're all suffering in that respect at the moment. So it must be difficult. I know other things are going to be brought up later, so I won't ask them now. So Gareth, if I come to you, I mean, you mentioned all the things I've just said, cost of living, etc. You mentioned the rise of the far right. You omitted to say the rise of the far left, which could be deeply concerning for some. So I think you ought to be as well. All of these things are affecting all of us, aren't they?
Right, Assembly Member Hall, yeah, and a really good point there around the rise of the far left, so apologies from me.
That's okay.
It's the rise of the far right that really worries me, but then I would be as a trade unionist, right?
That really worries me.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, absolutely, there are all of these issues affecting everybody. I think what I would say is something that probably is quite important to try and articulate. Let me give you a go here. Nobody joins the Fire and Rescue Service not expecting to have a bad day. Nobody joins the Fire and Rescue Service not expecting to take the call as a control operator, not expecting to attend the call as a firefighter. Where we need to now find ourselves in is each and every one of us is different. We have different values, different, you know, a different lived experience and a different way to where we've got to. We have different pressures. So what the talk around teams is great, but there does need to be a piece of work around what you need individually. So as an individual, when the day comes, when that complexity arrives, when it looks really difficult and you recognise it in yourself or others recognise it in you, what is it that you're going to need? And that feels like a piece of work that we haven't done yet. And that feels like a piece of work that individuals need to be empowered to do as well. Does that make sense if I articulate that well or not?
Yeah. The problem is it's something different for every single person, and how to accommodate that when you're equally running a business or a service, I should say. And of course, the brigade is so different. Being in the watches can be a blessing. It can be it can be a noose around your neck if it doesn't work.
And that sort of plays exactly to that point. So everyone needs something different. So from the flexi-duty officer that's attending an incident and then going away on their own and works often in a solitary way, going out to somewhere in a different side of London that they never normally frequent, but they've been called there on a particular incident. Coming away from that, they don't have that lean back into the conversations that then happen afterwards. And sometimes those conversations don't happen until years afterwards. Sometimes everyone needs a little bit longer to process, you know, PTSD and the effects thereof for the first 28 days. All those sorts of things play into education or psych ed, as we mentioned earlier, that firefighters need when they say they need more training. But we also need to understand ourselves as a whole. You know, we come to work to rescue others. Why do we come to do that? What was the driver for that? What does a bad day look like for us, and what do we need to keep ourselves fit and well? That's kind of where I am on that one. So whilst the service may well give as much as the service can give, and often it's HR-led, which HR doesn't always equate well with well-being, there also needs to be that piece of work where we change societally to understand what it is for us to be fit and well. And that also enables us to then stand up to, and I'm going to do a full circle, things that we don't like, whether that's politically, whether that's in our own environment. But we need to feel more empowered and away from potentially like the slight victimhood of things being given to us. And I think since the pandemic especially, a lot of people are still in a place where they haven't been able to resolve or consolidate some of those experiences, which have been really very traumatic.
For everybody.
Quite.
We have to look at that. So what do you think are the avoidable stresses that are there? What could be done immediately?
Oh, I was told something once, and it was told me by a retired chief fire officer, and it was really straightforward. He said the most strategic decision anyone can make is when to say no. So that's the first part. And the ability to say no in the operational arena, well, not quite. You know, we respond in this first response practitioner way, where we're led by what's expected of us and risk benefit and all that kind of business. But as an individual, whether you're in senior leadership or whether you're just coming into the organisation, the ability to say no is very important. And to me, that's the form of empowerment that we need to get to. And that's very difficult in a hierarchical organisation. But that's why the trade union exists.
Give me an example of what you'd say no to. If you're asked to do a job.
No, but you're taking it into the practical. I'm taking it into something else. I'm saying, no, that's enough for me. That's what I'm saying. No, that's enough. I need to take space away from this. I'm not helping my colleagues, and I'm definitely not helping myself. Now, as a trade union, we've made sure that we continue to work for people's rights at work and their conditions and terms of service. So there is an expectation that people can step away from work when they need to. One of the things that I think is very dangerous within the fire and rescue service, if not all institutions, is when people are not well or they're on the cusp of being not well and they come to work and then they impose their stress onto others. It's a contagion. And then we start to deal with the outcome of that. And the outcome of that can be some horrendous decisions, which when we clinically look back through them, we can see they're horrendous, but we can't at the time because in the eye of the storm it felt calm.
There's a hell of a lot to unpick there, which I don't think we've got the time to do at the moment. I mean, obviously, getting the right things in place and in the right places down to watch level, really, I would assume, be so that other people can recognise it.
And it's back to that position of solutionising a quite intellectualised problem. It's complex, which is why I feel that people need to know what the basics are to look after themselves well and to be able to enact those basics. And some of that can be saying no, especially towards senior leadership roles.
OK. Spencer, have you got any comment on that? I know you have, but you're going to articulate any comment on that.
What I took from listening to Gareth was that I completely agree that people need to understand what's going on emotionally for them, understand where they are in a particular in their life, what's happening at home, and whether they are resilient enough and well enough to be at work and support others and make good decisions. I don't think that is particularly contentious. I think a lot of the work that I'd really like, I'm sure we'll bring in Dean. Dean's probably as close to the workforce as anyone, and the conversation that Dean's had with literally dozens of watches around mental health and helping. The work needs to be done individually. We need to give people the space and the information to allow them process and then reflect and understand where they are with their mental health and when too much is too much and they shouldn't be at work. So I think that's what I took from Gareth, and we agree in some respects.
I'll leave it at there for then. I'm coming on to Joss now, thank you. London Fire Brigade's wellbeing strategy sets an action that they will work more collaboratively with the Firefighters Charity and make better use of their resources to promote wellbeing messaging. So has that been happening, Joss?
Yes, I mean, we work nationally with all UK fire and rescue services, and we work closely with London Fire Brigade, as we do with so many others. We work primarily, and it links to the conversation that we were was just happening. As an organisation, our focus is very much on the individual and the individual's needs and understanding their needs around their health and well-being. But we also work with fire and rescue services at a system level, and that can be both driving and informing and supporting understanding of those different choices and options of support that are available to people, raising awareness of who we are and what we do within and across their service and who's eligible for our support. But also we do deliver some of our health information sessions within the workplace. And last year we delivered to over 400 LFB attendees sessions around managing stress, resilience, and improving well-being. And that is speaking to the point that that you were just talking about, which is enabling people to understand how these things show up for them as individuals. What does anxiety look like for you, so that people can start to recognise and understand those things, both in the workplace but also at home and for who they are as a whole person. But then also, where are those help structures should you need that support, and how to create or understand that reaching out early is really important. So those sessions are kind of focused on those things. So we work at an individual and a system level, and definitely work closely with LFB
Good. Okay, I'm thrilled to hear that. Dean, I know that my colleagues are coming on to you because your experience is really important to us to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner, Gareth spoke about the need for people to step out or say when no is not enough, and you said you agree in some aspects. The obvious follow-up question is, what aspects do you disagree with, or is there something specific you disagree with?
Yeah, I think I was referring to Gareth's entire previous segment. I absolutely agree that when people aren't well enough, of course, they need to be supported, and they may need to have time off work, and they may need some specialist support. I think, as the professor in the previous panel mentioned, this is no way trying to shift that everything rests with individuals. But if individuals don't have the opportunity and the information to understand their own mental health, their feelings, anxiety or otherwise, everything else doesn't really work. Yes, you might have something that's there for them in the most acute times of crisis, but it's nearly too late at that point. You want people to be reaching out, having conversations, looking for informal support from peers, or using wider expertise much earlier than that. So I think, and it will continue to be ongoing desire that people understand their own feelings, emotions, and personal mental health. I think if you don't have that in place, everything else is weakened by it.
I definitely don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what I'm understanding, you're saying it's a combination of both the individual responsibility, but the organisation making sure they're supporting that.
Absolutely, and the previous panel, I was absolutely fascinated. I love that concept of igloo. So I'll be going away after the day and speaking to Adrian about possibly bringing that in. It was really straightforward. It made perfect sense, and maybe that's going to help us with the kind of landing a message organisationally, those four kind of pillars that we need to continuously loop back in with. And if one of those pillars is missing, we're not going to be providing the comprehensive support that people deserve.
Sounds really promising. Thank you. Assemblymember Terrell.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the panel. Is it still morning? It is just about still morning. So I'm going to start with Adrian, and if anyone else from the LFB wants to jump in with answers, please don't. I'll come to Gareth separately with this. Which is what progress has been achieved against the measure of success in the LFB's wellbeing strategy?
So I think London Fire Brigade has a really comprehensive offer when it comes to wellbeing. So we tend to split the strategy into a number of different components. So there are elements focused on physical health, elements focused on psychological health, social wellbeing. We also have a financial wellbeing strand, and then also a bit that's focused on career pathway. So referring back to the conversation earlier about it being important to think about somebody's career start to finish and what different sort of inputs you might have. Particularly when it comes to the mental health, our focus is around providing a range of supporting structures that are generalised to our workforce, supporting managers and individuals in a slightly different way. So we have an internal counselling service. Obviously, it's a accredited service with the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. We have a new employee assistance programme. It offers a slightly different opportunity for staff who want to go to counselling outside of our internal service. We have our wellbeing dogs. We have access to other programmes such as Walk and Talk, which Dean, I'm sure, will talk about later. We have quite a comprehensive kind of range of things that we can point individuals to. In relation to, in the earlier panel discussion, there was lots of discussion about what about managers and what are they going to do. So we have a programme of stuff that's just support managers. So we have training interventions that are focused on enabling managers to recognise stress, anxiety, depression. So there's a one-day training course about that, about how they recognise symptoms and what they do with people when they recognise those symptoms in staff. We have some individual development that's targeted at all staff. So we have a programme of mental health awareness. We have supporting listening, training. We have a new training course that's just about to go in, which is about managing life stresses. So again, it's about recognising issues, trying to think of strategies, coping mechanisms. So there's quite a lot there, I think. There's stuff that we still need to do. So there's been lots of talk today, cost of living, financial impact having quite a significant impact, I think, now on general well-being. So we're going to try and improve our financial wellbeing support offer. So financial wellbeing support is available now through our employee assistance programme and by other means, but we're talking actively with other charities and bodies about whether we might introduce a different wellbeing support system.
Does anyone else from the LFB have anything to comment on that, or I'll throw it open to Gareth then, the same question.
There's a huge amount of progress. I started working with wellbeing in the fire service in 2007 in another service, and there was nothing then. There was no peer support. We did quite a bit of work in introducing it. And I sat down following the Grenfell Tower fire with the then head of counselling and spoke around certain things there that which they were unable to implement at the time, but we're now moving forwards. So yeah, there's a huge degree of travel. I wonder about it generationally. I wonder if we're doing a lot of training for people, and actually there's new generations of firefighters coming in that are in a much better space already. I don't know. Something I'd like to look at. As a trades union official, I do tend to see the worst of it. So objectively, my view can be very skewed at times and not data-led. Mine's often the 3 o'clock in the morning phone call because somebody's in this space psychologically and the end of their career is coming up and they're actually in a space where they're starting to contemplate end of life. These are the complexities that trade union officials have, and actually, if everything gets to its space where things are working well, my life might become quieter. But the 50-50 bargain, I think, is really important. The fact that the employer's putting all of the things in place needs to be met by the employee. It does need to be met, and there needs to be a real understanding of self, understanding of one's own well-being, as I've kind of touched on earlier when I was speaking to Assembly Member Hall, understanding that it's just as much the impetus on you to come to work and be fit and well. If you came to work and you were under the influence of a substance, you'd be in trouble. If you come to work and you're experiencing, dark thoughts, maybe not so much, because we're still not in that space. I'm not saying it should be punitive, not saying it should be penalised. I'm saying that people need to get themselves into a space and it needs to be accepted where we remove the stigma and we understand and appreciate that life's changed. Life's changed immeasurably for all of us. As Assembly Member Hall says, it's affected all of us. What I'd add to that is in the fire and rescue service, we were already up a notch. We were people that do things that other people don't want to do. And it's honourable to be a public servant, but how much of yourself do you give?
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Coming back to you then, Adrian, which is how does the LFB tailor its wellbeing training courses and self-help tools for the needs of different occupational groups and levels of seniority?
I'd say that most of our training is generalised training, but we do a range of different types of visits where people will go and talk with specific task groups, so it's much more face-to-face and can be tailored to the occupational group. So just going back to the earlier training, so a lot of the stuff, so we've got a management intervention which is focused on how do you manage stress, anxiety, depression, and then generalised courses about recognising symptoms, individual strategies for coping, etc. So they're generally focused at a broad range of staff. We don't necessarily do stuff differently, although we have done specific interventions with certain staff groups. So, for example, coming back to what Josh said earlier in relation to Firefighters Charity, there have been specific things that we've done with our control group in terms of the mental health and resilience, which has had a significant impact actually on mental health absence in that group. So it depends. We do target some stuff, but not necessarily. Most of it's generalised.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, if you want to come in, Josh.
I think just to add to that, I think that from our perspective and how we shape and deliver our support is very much focused on those kind of transition points where we see those peaks of need and impact for people. And we're really proud to work with fire and rescue services to enable us to understand those transition points, but also shape and inform our services. I think the other thing that's really important, and why it's so important for us to work with fire and rescue services and other organisations, is that mixed ecology of support that enables people to have choice, have different avenues and routes of support.
Thank you for that. What's the completion rates of LFB's wellbeing training courses? Completion rate.
I don't have that figure with me today, so I'm not quite sure what the completion rate is.
If you could write to the committee with that information.
Absolutely.
But then with the courses, when a course isn't complete, what actually happens next? Is there a follow-up with those who haven't completed their course?
I'm going to ask if Spencer would like to come in here. So basically, when our training courses are normally invite, there will be a process of did not attend, somebody might be invited to another course. Generally speaking, our courses are targeted at specific role or occupational groups. So with certain courses, if they're targeted at managers, they'll be targeted at junior officers, and there'll be a requirement that they attend. Some of our courses are voluntary, and you'll be put onto that course if you ask to be put onto that course.
Do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Assembly Member. The only thing I'd add was, as Adrian said, for example, we have it's been running for 2 or 3 years now, stress anxiety, supporting people with stress anxiety depression, which is a manager's course. And like any other mandatory training, which we think is important, there's an eligibility list, and we'll work through that and ensure that all eligible people will attend that. As Adrian said, a lot of our mental health support is also voluntary, because if we start mandating these aspects, it can have an adverse effect. So we have to be cautious around that. But like Adrian mentioned, we can write to you with some more information of what courses and what the completion rate is. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you get feedback from those who don't complete the course to get an understanding about why they don't, whether perhaps trying to assess whether or not maybe they didn't find it useful, and that's why they stopped doing it?
We do have systems in place, as in with any other training. I don't think we specifically have a bespoke system for this type of training.
Thank you. Could I just ask you, Deputy Commissioner, so Assembly Member Cooper in the first panel was making the point that you wouldn't let a firefighter onto an operational incident without a lot of training, but we're letting managers manage without necessarily the same level of training.
Yeah, so I think you can kind of intellectualise this a great deal, and you can also boil down leadership into a combination of compassion and competence. That's my own kind of personal opinion. If a leader is those two things, then they're probably going to do a good job. So although this area has been of particular interest over the last few years for a variety of reasons, that's never changed. So when I was a station officer on station, I would hope and I'd like to think that I was curious about people's well-being, what was happening in their personal life, because I knew what was happening in people's personal life also reflected directly to work, and I would be interested in their health and wider well-being and what was going on in their lives. I think that's what good managers and good leaders do. That's not to say we also need to take that seriously and give people the help and support as they move through into supervisory roles, how to be good leaders. And I'm sure the committee's well cited on a whole variety of work that we've done, post-culture review in particular, and the leadership offer that continues to build and what that means for our staff.
Because that's the point, isn't it? You might have inherently had those qualities anyway, and those can cross over sometimes from a different job to a management job, but they don't necessarily cross over, or sometimes people don't know how to access them.
I think you're absolutely right, Chair, and quite often it's about unlocking those characteristics or those attributes, because I'd like to think that most firefighters, they join because they care, they want to help people. So they're inherently they're kind of compassionate. Sometimes we need to give people the autonomy and allow them to understand that when they become a manager, they can also be kind and compassionate. That is an absolute key attribute, and we would want them to do that. Sometimes people think that the two things aren't necessarily compatible, especially if they haven't necessarily had good leadership in their lives previously. But I think we're fully agreed on that.
It's really helpful. Adrian, in the last section, I felt like you wanted to come in and you didn't quite come in. I don't know if you still wanted to make that point, or if you can remember what it was.
Josh had used a particular word that reminded me of just something in terms of targeting at specific role groups. And it's probably worth mentioning that we do have quite a specific offer for our firefighters who are coming into the job on firefight development. So there's increased mental health support around those individuals when they start the job, in terms of coming back to Gareth's point and other people's point about clear expectations about role. We have staff that visit them early in their development and talk to them about some of the things that they're likely to do, some of the things that they might see, put that into context around broader wellbeing support that's available to them. We follow up with firefighters when they have their first critical incident, so specific attention is paid to firefighters when they first start, where they might have that difficult job, and so we absolutely have touching points with our counselling team about how we would support those individuals. So I think it was just worth mentioning that because it is different for that particular group of staff.
That's really helpful, thank you. Deputy Commissioner, I have a very specific question about data. So the last time data was published on sickness rates by occupational group was in July 2024 in the People's Service Biannual Performance Report, Q3 to Q4. Are you planning to publish an update on this?
I'm not sure the exact timings, but I'm more than comfortable to share historic and current data around sickness and different types of sickness with the committee. There's no problem at all with that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Assemblymember Clark.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to go back to the wellbeing strategy if I can. Spencer, you made a really interesting point about how because the way in which people view poor mental health is changing. Does that mean that you're seeing an increase of number of people accessing the service, and within that, do you have enough funding to keep the increase in pressure on the services going in terms of accessing mental health support and things like days off that people might need, that sort of sickness leave?
Yes, thank you, Assembly Member. Of course, we would always welcome additional resources to support the offer. I think we're now in a position, particularly around, so it's fair enough to say that post-Grenfell, two things have been apparent. One, we had to quickly increase the size of our counselling and trauma services that are extremely well qualified to deal with acute trauma, and that team effectively doubled, and we've now got a team of 16, which is substantial for a fire service, and as you'd expect for a large fire service. That team has struggled to meet the demands over the years, and one of the reasons why we introduced the employee assistance programme is to try and take some of the pressures away from that team, allow that team use all their expertise on acute trauma response in particular. There's some really positive news around our kind of service level kind of KPIs around that team and the response. There's more work to do, and we're always looking to streamline those referral pathways as well. So I'm not here today saying we need more money, we haven't got enough money to provide the service we've got. Of course, we would always welcome additional support and funding, but I think the comprehensive offer we've got now is good, and I think a lot of the work we need to do now is make it more visible so all our staff understand what that offer is. Some more specific training, I think, around managers about having supportive conversations and supporting their colleagues, and also some more informed use of the data. I think they're the three key areas that I think we can improve going forward, and we have got plans in place against those three as well. Thank you.
So with increased awareness, though, I mean, you were saying that at times that they're struggling to meet the demands. Do you feel that service can be resilient enough if you have an increase in awareness and an increase of number of firefighters seeking out that provision?
Yeah, I think the KPIs that we have are certainly going in the right direction. I would like them obviously as short as possible. I would like a referral to be followed up as quickly as possible with direct support, because people aren't reaching out unless they need support. I will bring in Dr. Bevan, if I can, who effectively oversees that counselling trauma, because you may be aware last year before last, in September 2024, in recognition of what the previous panel highlighted, there's a direct correlation. You can't separate health and safety and well-being, and that's when Adrian took over overseeing the function of well-being as well as health and safety.
Yeah, so just to build on Spencer's point, really. Yeah, so that's the main reason that we brought in the Employee Assistance Programme, or one of the main reasons, is that so we can have some resilience in relation to the counselling offer. So we've seen waiting lists reduce fairly significantly in CTS, so down from at one point above 8 weeks down to less than 2. So in terms of waiting list, being able to visit a counsellor through our internal service is significantly better through community NHS services. It is quicker for our staff to go and see an internal counsellor. With EAP, we're just hoping that we're going to drive that even further, and it gives us just a little bit more resilience if we do see that there are increasing numbers of referrals. The number of referrals is relatively steady, so month on month we see about 40 to 60 new referrals each month. That's been fairly steady over the last 6 months. We're not anticipating that's going to change anytime soon, fingers crossed. So at the moment, I think we're relatively confident in the service levels that we have.
Okay, that's fine. And then Gareth, to you. Slightly different questions, but were the LFB's wellbeing strategy and mental health policy, were they well received by firefighters?
I think all help is well received by firefighters, from fitness strategy to training to proper training. To it's a learning organisation ultimately. People have got a quest for education within that role to be as professional as they can be. So, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, good. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Assemblyman Hall.
Thank you. Dean, what an incredible gentleman you are. To actually start the Walk and Talk 999 was an incredible thing to do, and I absolutely applaud you. And I believe there's 7 of these in London. Are they spread out evenly around London?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me here today. At the moment, do you know what? No, I'm rubbish at geography. Yeah, we got 7. We're trying to get as many as we can across London, because obviously the more accessible they are to people, the more likely people are going to use it. If they've got to travel far, then obviously it's going to be harder for people. They're pretty spread out at the moment. We've never pushed anything. Literally, when we started this back in 2021, I literally went into with the idea, if I can help one person, not how I felt at certain times, it was worth it. I never thought of this growing. So the journey's been very overwhelming, but in a massive good way. So we've just started our 21st walk, all the way from Scotland down to the coast. So we've got them actually national now. But yeah, the 7 in London are pretty spread out, but then they don't cover all areas, because what happens is we've opened them where people have approached me and just said, look, could you help me open a walk in my local park? I'd like to help. So that's generally how we do it. Going forwards, we are having discussions about now. I never thought this was something we'd ever have to look at, because it's growing. We maybe need to now look at a vision going forwards, because it's obviously grown so much. But up till this point, it was just, people helping people. It was never meant to be a big thing. It was never meant to be, even like logos, things like that. It was never meant to be anything like that. So the fact that it's grown into this naturally is fantastic. But yeah, our aim has always been to try and get as many walks in as many areas for as many demographics. We obviously started it off to encourage men to reach out and talk for obvious reasons. But as we've gone along, we've actually we've now got 3 walks for all. So we always encourage any walk for anyone, because it's always good. We've opened a mum's walk as well, which has just started a couple of months ago, to try and encourage mums to be, because obviously there's certain struggles that come with that. We're in talks with lots and lots of people around the country, early stages, about opening more walks. We've networked with many other services, charities we've partnered up with, so it's been quite overwhelming. But yeah, sorry, it's a long way to answer your question.
No, you carry on, because this is so important.
Yeah,
and the joy is this isn't just for you now. So many people are doing this. There was one launched or talked about anyway on the media at the weekend, Tom Skinner, with a load of people. But I love the fact that, particularly if you have firefighters, you've got the same sort of issues.
Yeah.
You know, and they're horrific at times. And only another firefighter would really understand how you feel. This is why I think it's amazing.
Yeah, and that was always the idea. You know, we didn't invent this idea. When I originally thought about it, it's because I've been through stuff, and someone actually asked me, around about in 2018, unfortunately it took me 13 years in this job to sit back when I went out to a particular incident and think, why has it affected me? Then realise, actually, whatever service you work in, as soon as we go through training school, subconsciously or consciously, we almost put this pressure on ourselves, go, right, I'm a firefighter, police officer, you know, whatever service, I have to be all right with everything I see. You know, so if it's affected me, can't let it affect me. I need to, this is the job I do, it's my identity. It took me 13 years till I got to a stage where I went out to an incident, it affected me badly. I didn't reach out early enough. I got to, you know, maybe a bit of crisis, finally reached out and found out by me showing vulnerability, other people opened up and said they were struggling as well. Yeah. And a lot of jobs from my past come back that I hadn't dealt with for same reasons. So that's why we went into it, is just like-minded people, shared lived experience, you know, and that's why a lot of us, when we go home, I know you spoke about officers going home, you know, not having the support. When we go home, we don't open up to our families, not because we don't want to talk. One, we don't want to obviously put some of the images, you know, maybe to them.
They're horrific at times.
But also, if you not being there, you almost have to explain the scene, the setup. You know, people can have empathy for us and go, that must be, you know, awful. But talking to someone in the job, you know, gets the feelings. And like I say, we never invented this. The original idea was we were going to hire a village hall, try and get people talking. But then we thought, actually, it's quite intimidating. You know, a bit like this, you know, sitting eye contact, pressure to talk, doesn't encourage it, fight or flight. Being outside, there's a lot of science behind it. You know, seeing, breathing fresh air, seeing sky, a little bit of exercise. Like, whenever any of you walk around a park, walk on a beach, you just feel a little bit better. It releases good chemicals. Walking side by side, flight or flight doesn't kick in as much. It just, so I went into it with, even if someone turns up and doesn't want to open up, just getting them out of the house in a different, we're going to do good for them. It's going to benefit them in that respect. If they talk, great. Like I say, so I got invited on a walk, a local walk with some guy that did the similar in the community. So all we did was adapted that and said, right, let's do this purely for emergency services. So it's open to fire, police, ambulance, armed forces, NHS, prison service, any trauma-related field, because although it's different jobs, we get what it's like to be in that position. And yeah, the fact that it's grown. When we started, I remember when I started it with a friend of mine, I said, look, it'd probably be me and you holding hands for 6 months on our own, walking around. No one's going to join us. But straight off the bat, we had people joining us week after week. And where it started growing, very early days, we had a couple of guys that turned up. They were long-term sick, and they said it helped them get back to work because it made them realise they want to be around people. Yeah. They're not alone. They realise, you know, and they approached me and said, look, it's a long way for me to come. Could you help me open a walk? So I said, yeah, I'll help you open. And it sort of naturally grew from there. And then Becky from Control was a good friend of mine, backed this from the beginning, very supportive of this, you know, been a great support for myself as well. She said one day, why don't we put it out on social media, you know, because other people might benefit but don't know it's there. Scared the life out of me because, you know, I wasn't into social media. But she put it on Twitter, and the first people to pick it up were the Firefighters Charity. Kindly came down, did a promotional video for us, a case study, which you can see on their site, and then it just rocketed from there. We now work with lots of other charities. Mine, Samaritans did a case study on us, which again was overwhelming. Blue Light Card, yeah, to name a few. But, you know, but it shows you the needs there. Because one thing I find, there's a narrative, isn't there? Men don't want to talk, but men do want to talk. We just need to provide that safe space.
Well, that's right.
And that's where it works, because it's not clinical. There's a place for that, but what we find is a lot of people on the walks might have reservations, going to doctors, going to counsellors, going to the charity. It gives us that chance as well to talk to them about it and explain what involves. And we've had a lot of people then go on to get the more clinical support. because it's allowed you to share that. But
Well,
yeah, sorry, again, I go off on a bit of a tangent when I...
That's fine. It's
start
fine.
talking.
I think it's incredible what you've done.
Thank you.
Have you had help from the brigade advertising it?
Yeah, they've been really good. So for the last, I'd like to say 3 years, so Jonathan Smith was the commissioner, was very good when he was at AC Fire Station, saw it, actually come on one of our walks, saw it firsthand, and he said, you know, what support can we give? I said, well, the one thing, we need to be more visible, because we were having people turning up when we were just a couple of walks saying they could have done with it 6 months ago, but I didn't know it was there. So for 3 years, I've been going around talking to watches and departments to, one, explain why we're there, you know, what it's for, how it helps. Because also we have a lot of people say, well, it's nice to know they are, if I'm struggling. But we say, even if you're not struggling, it's still good. Come down, a bit of a social. You know, some people live at home. They treat it as a social. Some people it's good to maintain, helping others that, you know, might be struggling. But what we've done now, we've developed our talks as we go round. The first part we talk about the walks, and then the second part we talk generally about the stigmas in the job, you know, signs and symptoms that you might be struggling. And the big thing I'm keen on is, like we said earlier, the variety of support that is available. And there's a lot that is targeted purely at emergency services. There's places where, like Embers Woodcraft and You Turn Back to Basics, which are aimed at emergency services, where you go camping, you sleep in hammocks with like-minded people only from the services, and you're given a chance to talk. Places you can go surfing. There's places you can swim with Newfoundland dogs, you know, these big bear dogs, with Peterloo in Newfoundlands. There's ICARP, you can go fishing. There's PTSD 999 that supports people, you know, struggling with PTSD. There's a wealth of stuff out there that is targeted for the emergency services purely as well, and it's all, a lot of it's free to us. So a lot of our conversation well goes around that. We talk about the in-house stuff, EAP, all the great facilities we've got now, mental health first aiders, wellbeing dogs. It gives us that chance. When I was first asked to do it, because I've been a firefighter for a long time, 22 and a half years now, when I was asked to do it, I was a little bit nervous because, you know, speaking like this isn't really my comfort zone. I remember saying to my wife, I think I'll do it a week and I'll probably want to come back. You know, probably no one's going to open up. Literally from the start, watches that I'd never met before were opening up about what they're going through or what they might have gone through. People were approaching us afterwards to talk about, you know, where can they get help, where can they get support. So it just sort of proves if you offer a place to have them safe conversations, it really encourages people to go on to get that support.
Well, that's right. And people can just go on the walk, and if they don't feel comfortable the first time, maybe they'll open up the second time. Well, I think you should be absolutely applauded for what you do. Some of us have got very big social media platforms, and I'm sure that I know Zach would, we would advertise this for you or let people know this is there, because it is so important. There's nothing more important. And I was surprised, I heard not that long ago that particularly men are more likely to talk to other men if they're beside them walking along, as opposed to, as you mentioned, looking at each other, which I thought was an interesting aspect.
Yes,
but
distraction.
Reach out to lots of us. We would be very happy to let people know that this is available and where it is, especially if some of us are located in areas we might be able to help. Yeah. But well done, and thank you to all the people that you've helped.
No, thank you. Yeah, and I'd just like to say, it only works because we have volunteers. We've got 40 walk leaders that give up their own time every week. And the nice thing is, like, we're not a charity or anything like that. It's just people giving up their time to support others. So it also, for me, gives me a bit of faith in people wanting to do good.
Because, it makes it more valuable, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really nice, like, team and community we've built as well. But yeah, any help or support would be absolutely really grateful for. Thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, I'm sure I can echo the whole committee. Thanks for everything you do, Dean. And also, you public speak brilliantly, so you should do it more often. Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you. I think you'd find it a bit weird if I suddenly started looking away from you, but I think that's very true about, you know, if you go fishing with somebody and people are both looking at the river, people say all sorts of things. I'm not a big person who enjoys fishing or anything like that, but I have noticed that that is the case. Or driving. I think people also find it in the car, and if you're the person who's driving, you are definitely going to be looking at the road and not at, well, hopefully, and not the person sitting next to you. So I think it's I don't know why it is, that whole thing of not being stared at, but it does seem to help people open out. Now, you said that you've been allowed to go around and advertise a Walk and Talk 999, and so the word is getting out through the brigades, but I'm now going to ask either Adrian or Spencer, probably Spencer, I don't know, either of you, why the LFB wellbeing strategy and mental health policy do not currently signpost the Walk and Talk 999. I mean, is this not something that should be mentioned in the strategies?
I would say that they do, and if they don't, that's an absolute oversight, but I think they do. Yeah. So Dean really is part of the wellbeing team, and as part of his Walk and Talk, he also does stuff through the wellbeing team and advertises and talks about a range of different services that Brigade are involved in. So one of the things that we haven't really talked about today is our response to critical incidents. So something that was mentioned in the session earlier about trauma being a particular issue for firefighters. So London Fire Brigade's introduced a programme which is the Emergency Services Trauma Intervention Programme, our response to post-critical incidents, which is a peer-led programme, which is about how we reach out to staff who may have attended a critical incident and have discussions with them about normalising initially their response to that incident, but following up to see if they need further support. And Dean's actively involved in that process. You might want to talk practically about how it occurs.
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing on mental health today, but I would imagine that if people have had some sort of, injury in a traumatic incident, that coming along on a walk is going to help with their gradual recovery. My final question, though, is for Jos. How would you assess the LFB's support, going back to talking about suicide, which we were earlier on, for suicide prevention? Is that something you're in a position from the Firefighters Charity to talk about?
So we're not in a position to kind of scrutinise individual fire and rescue services, but what I can talk to is the offer that we have around suicide, which is nationally available and kind of is available for LFB colleagues as well. And that's our suicide crisis line. Which is available 24/7 every day of the year to anybody that works in and with fire and rescue services, but also their family members or retired personnel as well. And we set that up with support of fire and rescue services in 2023. And through that service, we see people reaching out to us both at times of significant crisis and suicidal ideation, and for those that are perhaps in crisis but not quite at the point of suicidal ideation. And I think what's really positive about that support is it isn't just a one phone call and we'll speak to you about where you are at that point in time and stabilise you. We do that, but what we also offer is support for 5 further sessions with the individual you've spoken to on that very first call to help you stabilise using a methodology called CAMS to help somebody stabilise and then be in a position to reach out for further support. And I think what that offer does is it kind of sets us apart from other helplines because it is that ongoing support, and that can happen. You may call, we've had people call us on Christmas Day and the first session be set up for Boxing Day. So that happens very immediately or at the pace that an individual requires and needs. But then also through our services, our broader range of services, somebody can move from that crisis intervention through into perhaps some talking therapies, come to one of our residential centres where they get some of that peer support elements, could be focused on trauma, could be focused on thinking and helping them improve and grow their resilience around their mental well-being. So that sits within a broader kind of range of support services and offers people that that choice, and that's available to LFB colleagues. Interestingly, what we do see through that service, and it kind of aligns with national statistics outside of for the Fire and Rescue Service, is we see men calling us between the ages of 40 to 49 who are in work and who are experiencing those significant stresses which are pushing them to that point of crisis and needing that support.
Dean, if it came up, it became apparent on one of the walks that it looked as though somebody was heading towards that sort of crisis point, is that something that people leading the walks or people who are listening to someone on one of the walks would be able to signpost that person towards getting some other help?
Yeah, we do.
We're not expecting you to do walk and talk and also counselling people away from suicide.
Yeah, before someone starts a walk, I always do a little bit of input with them about safeguarding, about how you're not to be their main support network. They shouldn't be contacting you outside the walk. When we do the check-in circle, we always do a talk at the start to explain that. You know, we're not trained professionals. You know, we're just here to give you a place to come out, talk to like-minded people. We do a check-in at the start where we give everyone a chance to rate their mental fitness out of 1 to 10 to give them a chance if they want to highlight how they're feeling without actually saying the words, and then they're given a chance to get anything off their chest. But the big thing which we are doing is the signposting, is as we're walking around at the end, and we always, when we have the checkout circle at the end, we always say, you know, if anyone needs any signposting or we feel they could do it, we'll let you know. The amount of people that do end up going to people like the charity in particular that would turn up and not be aware how much they offer and what to do it, as the uptake has been fantastic. We have people coming back saying that, you know, they should have done it years ago, didn't really understand. It gives us a chance to talk. I've personally used their facilities, which, yeah, is absolutely amazing. But, yeah, we always make sure we don't overstep the mark, and the safeguarding is the same as if we're at work or any workplace. If we're worried about anyone in particular, then we would have to break confidentiality and obviously highlight it and seek support from them.
OK, well, you answered some of my follow-on questions as
Sorry.
well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Unless anyone wants to say anything else, that's the conclusion of the panel. Please, Adrian.
So just in terms of the brigade and suicide prevention, so the brigade has a range of work that would fall under what we would call a suicide prevention strategy. So there's a range of work that we do which is targeted at prevention, or maybe you would call it upstream, which is looking at building resilience, having training in place that is about building awareness. So we advertise the Zero Suicide Alliance suicide awareness course, and then referring back to some of the stuff we do earlier, there's mental health awareness, general life stresses, all about promoting awareness of the issues. We worked with the Samaritans to develop a suicide postvention toolkit. We're also, so the National Fire Chiefs Council are developing a suicide prevention kind of strategy model that we're reviewing, and we'll review that against our systems when that comes out, just to make sure that we've got all of that in place.
Thank you. Assembly Member Hall has one more question.
It's only a quick one. When we recruit, do we try and, I mean, you wouldn't recruit somebody that's got massive claustrophobia, doesn't like heights. I mean, that's me in a nutshell. I just could not do it. But so you'd be aware of that. Do you have any mechanism of finding out if people are particularly anxious before you even start? Because, I mean, anybody. Because I just think that it's a really hard job. And if people aren't particularly aware of some of these difficulties, would it be easier to, this sounds harsh, sift some people out because it is so strenuous, this job?
Yeah, so we are actively reviewing what an assessment of psychological or emotional resilience would look like as part of our recruitment process at the moment.
That's
so
great. Good to hear.
How we might improve that.
Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, sorry, just two things I'd like to highlight, because I think it's, you know, really, really positive move forward. Something I've always been keen on as well is how we engage with, you know, new cohorts starting this job. It was always like when I started, it was left you got the station to find out how things work, and obviously you turn up, it's a new watch, you've got to learn to trust them, they've got to learn to trust you. So obviously there's a certain period of time where you could be struggling but not wanting to reach out. So what we've been doing for the last 2 years, we go to and speak to the cohorts on their first week at training school, so they get a chance to talk to a firefighter about, you know, what they're joining, what it's like. But also I talk about, you know, things I struggle with, what I didn't do at their stage and what I should have done. But also it gives us a really good opportunity to explain all the support networks that are there and encourage that reaching out to try and stop that idea of I have to be all right as soon as I get to training school, and showing it's not a weakness if you're struggling, it's a new job. Of course, you know, first time you do anything is going to be stressful, so it's not you not coping. So it gives us that opportunity. But again, we broached it earlier, the new post-critical incident contact we do, the peer-to-peer support we've just brought in last year, where we're phoning as firefighters to talk to firefighters, to have genuine check-ins and make sure they're all right, and let them give a chance to, you know, talk, and also let them know what's available, including all the external stuff, some of what I've highlighted earlier. The uptake on that has been great. The feedback from that, the reception when we're calling people has been really, really positive. So going forwards, I think that's hopefully going to be a real game changer as well.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again to all the panel. That was a really excellent discussion about a very important topic. We just have a few short items of business, which I promise will conclude very quickly. Can we note the report and today's discussion? Noted. Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output from the discussion? Agreed. Can the committee note its work programme for 2025-2026? Noted. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for 17th of March 2026 at 10 a.m. in the Chamber City Hall. There's no other urgent business. I now declare this meeting to be closed.